Dushman ka dushman, mera dost. So, are we friends with the Taliban now? Is that what is going on? Because in the last 1 week, for the first time since the Taliban took over in 2021, one of their senior leaders, their foreign minister Amir Khan Muttaqi, came to India for a 6-day visit and met with our external affairs minister. India has decided to upgrade its mission to Kabul, and both sides are now talking about trade and development projects and investments. This would be completely unthinkable 25 years ago. So, what has changed now? Here's my entire breakdown, explainer on what's going on between India and the Taliban. Remember, like, share, subscribe, sign up for our membership if you can. It supports us. Let me take you through what has happened now and why we're asking these questions, right? Amir Khan Muttaqi is a foreign minister of the Taliban regime. He's come to India. He received a full diplomatic welcome, high-level meetings, met with External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. This meeting was publicly framed as part of a reset of ties. The visual that was released by our External Affairs Ministry shows that the two leaders meeting, no flags on either side. And this is interesting because India has not acknowledged, the Taliban regime, and so there is no embassy and there is no flag of the Taliban that has been used in India anywhere. So using a flag would have sent some signals. Now, India allowed the Taliban delegation to enjoy a full official protocol, which means meetings and press events, even though full recognition has not been granted yet. The Taliban flag or the national symbolism were used in diplomatic spaces. Apparently, the first press conference which actually received a lot of flack because no women journalists were allowed in, the two Taliban leaders came in and took out a small flag from their bag and put it on the table in front of them. And there was a lot of controversy about that because they were also sitting, and here's a visual, at the backdrop of the Bamiyan Buddha, which the Taliban themselves destroyed. And that is because the embassy that the embassy that they're currently sitting at is being run by the old regime still, which India still recognizes. So the officers or the people actually running that embassy belong to the previous regime and they're anti-Taliban. So there was a lot going on in that press conference. After that press conference and the exclusion of women journalists, there was another press conference that was held in which a lot of women journalists in India, from India, actually went and sat in the front row and asked a lot of difficult questions. But here is why there's been a lot of critique about this visit. One, the decision to bar women from press conferences in India was a massive flashpoint. The Taliban said it was a technical issue and it was short notice. India's External Affairs Ministry said it was not involved at all in organizing that event. There were critics that said that the display of the Taliban flag and the dignified treatment of those leaders from a regime that subjugates women is at odds with what India stands for in terms of our constitutional ethos. And of course, some analysts actually say that by welcoming Taliban leaders and by not pushing hard on women's rights, we're normalizing a regime that is deeply illiberal and stands against everything that India stands for. So then why are we doing it, right? So that's the question to ask. Why is India welcoming the Taliban right now? Let's break that down. And this story should be called India and the Taliban from Hostility to a Very Cautious Handshake. Now, the reason why this is a challenge, and I have to give you some context, let's go back December 1999. For those who are too young to remember, you would have watched the show that came out called IC-814. It was about a flight that was hijacked. It was an Air India flight, an Indian Airlines flight, I beg your pardon, that was hijacked from Kathmandu to New Delhi and taken to Kandahar, which was at that point under Taliban control. And the hijackers demanded the release of 3 Pakistani terrorists from Indian jails. Masoor Azhar, Ahmad Omar Saeed Sheikh and Mustaq Ahmad Zargar. Now, Masoor Azhar went forward. Then after he was released, to actually found the Jaish-e-Mohammed. It was behind the Pulwama attack in 2019. Saeed Sheikh kidnapped and murdered Daniel Pearl, the American journalist. And this sort of defined for India its relationship with the Taliban. Taliban was seen by India as hostile, as Pakistan-backed, and a group that was sheltering anti-India terrorists. And when the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001 and toppled the Taliban, India welcomed it. And for the next 20 years, after the Taliban was chased away, India worked closely with the US-backed Afghan government, investing $3 billion over 20 years in roads, hospitals, schools, even actually built their parliament building. We've trained Afghan officers, we've offered scholarships, we've offered medical treatment, we've built enormous goodwill with the Afghan people. Come back now to August 2021. The US withdrew from Afghanistan, the Taliban marched back into Kabul almost overnight. The Ashraf Ghani government collapsed. Indian diplomats had to be airlifted out of there. We shut our embassy. We cut off official contact. And New Delhi was very clear. We did not recognize the Talibani regime that had taken power by force, especially because it had such close links to Pakistan's ISI. Behind the scenes, though, some conversations had begun to happen. In fact, August 31st, 2021, 2 weeks after the Taliban takeover, our own foreign ministry put out a statement saying that India's ambassador to Qatar, Deepak Mittal, had met with Taliban's political office in Doha to voice a very key concern that Afghan soil should not be used in any sort of anti-India terrorism. And that conversation was the first thaw between India and the Taliban. Step by step after that, in June 2022, India opened a technical mission in Kabul to oversee humanitarian trade. Last year, India's diplomat JP Singh met the Taliban defense minister, and this year in January, our foreign secretary Vikram Misri met with Mutaki in Dubai. So we've actually gone step by step by step. In May this year, External Affairs Minister and Mutaki spoke on the phone after the attack at Pahalgam, and Taliban publicly condemned that attack. That was a really big step forward. Another phone call happened after the earthquake in eastern Afghanistan, and India has sent relief material and tents and help over to Afghanistan. And all of this has sort of been back-channel efforts that's culminated in the visit that has happened this month in October. In fact, the individual in question, Mutaki, is sanctioned by the United Nations and not allowed to travel. But the United Nations Security Council gave him special travel exemption so he could visit India this October. He met with Jaishankar. Like I've told you, we've decided, these are the announcements that India has made. India's technical mission in Kabul is now upgraded to a full embassy. India will restart development projects in healthcare and infrastructure. India will build a hospital in Kabul and 5 maternity clinics. 20 new ambulances will be gifted to the country. India will also build homes for Afghan refugees who've been forced out of Pakistan. Remember, Pakistan conducted mass deportations. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, has called it, and I'm quoting, an enduring friendship between India and the Afghan people. He appreciated what he called the Taliban's sensitivity to India's security concerns, referring to their condemnation of the Pahalgam terror attack. Now, speaking to journalists in New Delhi, this was that first press conference where no women were allowed. Mutaki actually said that Afghanistan will not allow any elements to use its territory against India. And he invited Indian companies to come and invest in Afghanistan's mining sector and to reopen trade routes via the Wagah border, which is a direct shot at Pakistan. Now, why is India doing this? Let's be honest, this is not about friendship. This is about strategy. There are 3 main reasons why India is doing it. One is security. India wants to make sure that Afghanistan's soil is not used by Jaish-e-Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Toiba. Mutaki has claimed these groups don't exist in Afghanistan anymore, but India will want to engage to actually hold to that promise. Second is regional influence. Now, since the Taliban took over, China has really moved aggressively into Afghanistan, signing mining deals, starting infrastructure projects. India doesn't want to leave that gap empty. So one actually expert has said that India wants to regain that lost influence that we lost during the regime change and re-establish connections in Kabul. But the third and the most interesting argument right now is that the Taliban and Pakistan has fallen out. They're not friends anymore. And so there's gap and room here for India to move in. I wanted to take you back to images of 2021 where Pakistan's ISI chief Faiz Hamid was sipping tea in Kabul and smiling when the Taliban took over. That honeymoon, from what we understand, is now over. In 2023, the Taliban refused to act against TTP, a group that continues to attack Pakistani soldiers. When Islamabad demanded action, Taliban simply said no. In October this year, fighting has erupted across the border, as we know. According to the Pakistani army, 33 Pakistani soldiers and 200 Taliban fighters were killed in one night of clashes. Pakistan retaliated by bombing Taliban targets in Kabul. This was while Mutaki was in India, and New Delhi could not have asked for better timing. It was perfect because the Taliban now wants to prove that it is independent of Pakistan, that it has nothing to do with Pakistan, and India has a perfect partner to showcase that independence. Doordarshan News has actually put it out saying, Pakistan's bombing of Afghanistan exposes its desperation to reassert control over a regime slipping from its grip. So Pakistan is not able to control the Taliban anymore, and that is why these fights have now emerged on their border. It gives India a perfect opportunity to re-establish control. Has India now officially recognized the Taliban? Not officially, but in practicality. Former Indian ambassador Dilip Sinha told Doordarshan News that reopening an embassy now is a de facto recognition. So India joins a dozen other countries that now have embassies in Kabul: China, Pakistan, UAE, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. Only Russia, though, has formally recognized the Taliban government and accepted its ambassador and allowed for that flag to fly over that embassy. So remember, in the 1990s, India, Russia, and Iran had all supported the Northern Alliance against Taliban, and now those roles have been reversed. So effectively, this is where we are. India is, according to Harsh Pandit, the Observer Research Foundation, India is uncomfortable with the Taliban's record on minority rights and gender rights, but there's pragmatism in this engagement. So effectively, the Taliban has a terrible track record when it comes to humanitarian rights, especially for women and girls. And this is something India has never stood for. But is this a pragmatic way of approaching the geopolitical scene in our neighborhood? And that is perhaps why it has come under that much criticism. So the Taliban has, of course, as soon as they landed, reminded everybody who they are by coming to India, holding a press conference in Delhi and saying no women journalists allowed. Of course, that visual went viral. The Editors Guild, the Women Press Corps, called it highly discriminatory. There was backlash. Pataki held another press meet inviting women and said that it was a sort of technical problem. But even with all of this, the Taliban's attitude towards women has not changed. Girls cannot go to school beyond the 6th grade in Afghanistan. Women cannot work in most jobs. They can't leave their house unless they're fully covered. The reality has not gone unnoticed, and we are hoping that India will push this agenda of women's rights as it continues to engage with the Taliban, which we're seeing that we're actually doing. It does appear that India's game plan here is to engage with everyone, but maybe trust no one. India cannot afford to ignore Afghanistan, not with China, Pakistan, and Russia moving in for influence. So it's getting what it wants, which is security depth in the neighborhood, and staying engaged. So, in the words of one Indian analyst, it is hedged diplomacy, which is more about pragmatism than principle. So the question that we come back to in the beginning that we asked, are we friends with the Taliban now? No, we're not friends. We're not enemies either. There's a very tight rope that India is walking, keeping channels open, keeping a watch, keeping its options ready, because in South Asia, things change really quickly. We've seen governments get toppled. We've seen things change overnight. So India's message to Kabul is clear. We will help you if you behave. We will talk as long as you come to the table and protect our interests. So that's my detailed explainer of India's new relationship with the Taliban, something we'll keep an eye on. We'll bring you updates for it. Leave me a comment in the comment section if you believe from where we stand right now. Again, it's a toss-up. Everything is a trade-off. India gaining influence in the neighborhood, using Afghanistan as a very, very important spot. Remember, Donald Trump is also very interested right now in air bases in Afghanistan, and the Taliban has said it's very clearly not going to allow any military into its space. So is this a different route for that influence that everybody seems to want? Is it okay in the meantime to perhaps glaze over the humanitarian track record, the gender rights track record of the Taliban, the way they're treating the women in their own country, or should India stand its ground? Where do you stand on this? Leave me a comment in the comment section.